Welcome back everyone, this is Ian with Epic Mike, and tonight we're doing something different. We're switching gears and doing a mega build slash tutorial, or at least starting to. I don't even know if the current base limits will allow me to complete it, but here's sort of how it all started. It started from the white whale a lot of people have in this game, since there's these specific nose cones that were inspired by the Viper Mark I from the original Battlestar Galactica series. And as you see, I've done a bit of whale hunting myself, so I've got this heavy fighter that resembles a heavy version of the Viper, which I've named the Viper Mark X, and this one, which is probably the closest setup that you can get in No Man's Sky to the Viper Mark II, which I have named in my headcanon the Viper Mark V. Now obviously only a few versions of the Viper have been shown on screen, and you know, it never hurts to sort of fill in the gaps with some creativity. And since I had the Viper, I thought to myself, why not build a Battlestar? Why not build a Battlestar in No Man's Sky? Obviously, this is a bit of an ambitious plan, and some will say there aren't enough parts in No Man's Sky to get a build close enough to resemble that. But nevertheless, we're gonna try, and if not, we're gonna fail. And we'll try to do all that with as little glitch building as possible. Now, I've gone ahead and set up this building platform in orbit, this sort of base. If you want to find out how to do that, you can find the tutorials on YouTube by Bibblebox. He's outlining all the glitch building methods and advanced building methods for the Frontiers update. His tutorials are amazing, so give them a look. You'll get enough ideas on as it is, and hopefully some just as ambitious. So we'll start with this, and this is sort of our basic. This will be the sort of bottom level of the Battlestar, and we'll start by putting up some walls to gain enough height, as we'll be starting with the CIC. There we go, just stack them up as high as it'll go. Now, you might wonder why I chose this particular planet to put it on. Now, as you know, there are some limitations to building bases off the ground. One of these is that there is a cap of about 1,000 meters, above which there will be you can all parts that you place over it will disappear when you reload, and you will not be able to access or delete them. So with that in mind, I've chosen a small moon that 1,000 meters above it will show enough of a curvature, so it will give the impression that we're higher than we actually are. And obviously an airless one will ensure that there are no clouds to otherwise obstruct our build or make it look like it's in the atmosphere. So the first thing I'm going to do is on this new building platform that we built is start by laying out some cables. Now, the cables have no practical use. They will not be used for powering anything, but they do serve as a marking on the ground, have a constant visual reference of where we're gonna put this, where we're gonna put everything, how the space is going to be arranged. Now, this specific layout has been based on a layout that I found on the internet, of course, of the Battlestar Galactica CIC. And it is, it shows how the entire sort of room is roughly an octagonal shape. Mark the exits. The squares, or actually rectangles, represent the helm area of the ship, and I'm using the squares on the floor to sort of level everything out and measure everything out. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to give you a general idea of where everything's going to go. And here we have it. There is our general layout of the CIC's floor. And this is what we'll start on. Obviously, it's not 100%, doesn't need to be, as we'll be constantly tweaking the design as to make sense visually and to more closely resemble what is seen on screen. And obviously we'll be starting with the centerpiece of the Galactica CIC, and that is the tack table. Obviously there's no better part for that, or any other part that makes sense really to use on the tack table than the actual light table. But we will have to do, I mean, obviously No Man's Sky parts are very, very specific, and we will end up having some differences, some minor, some major, but what we care about is more that the build evokes the visual style and the atmosphere of a Battlestar. Now, you probably noticed that the tack table is at an angle, and that's how it was in those designs I found, but we will address that a bit later. Now, after building some scaffolding, we put down the Drades hub where all the screens are mounted, and originally I started with the arm mounted screens, which seem to go very nicely around this hub piece, until you realize that you can actually resize the arm without resizing the screen itself. I mean, the end result just speaks for itself. So after a bit of playing around, I decided that there should be more to this hub, and maybe we could try conventional screens. Unfortunately, there's no other place for these swivel arm screens to mount other than that ring, so the orientation is not very conducive. So I put down this 8-sided locker down below the lab light and mounted some conventional screens on it, which, as you probably can see, presented the next obstacle that we have, is that the regular wall screens, even though their mounts allow us to put them on the right sort of angle, are much darker, much more opaque than the swivel arm screens. And after some trial and error to find some better hub parts that we could possibly customize, I figured, you know what, this 8-sided part is the best. Tried it with a few different screens, a few different placements. Obviously the 3 screens I've put originally won't line up with the bottom screens, because you can't get a triangle orientation on an 8-sided piece. Finally, I decided to do away with the swivel arm screens and just add some more wall screens. Aesthetically, at least, they are the closest thing we can get. Unfortunately, there are no standard screens, they're all hollow screens, so we'll have to live with some transparency. Like I said, we can only do the best we can with what we have. And after a quick visual test, I realized we have too few screens. But, you know, we'll deal with that a bit later. First, I tried putting some parts on the tack table itself to emulate all the equipment the crew have at their disposal. Couldn't really find something that matched and attached properly, so I thought I'd leave that for another time as well. But we'll get to that. We'll get everything looking properly. Then, going back to the screens, I decided to go with the orange screens, as they are closer to, visually at least, they're closer to what the original Battlestar has. Unfortunately, we can't change the readout, but we'll just have to live with it. So we ended up going with 4 sides of screens. I know on the series it is 5 sides of screens with the bottom row being 4, but obviously there's no way we can properly arrange those and align them on an octagonal piece. Maybe a round one, which is why I tried alternate pieces, but there you have it. And after some fiddling with size and placement, I decided, you know what, that is close enough. And it is. So there we have it. The centerpiece of the CIC has been done. It looks good for now. We will not worry about it until we have the rest in place. So we have to start putting down some workstations, and nothing is better for that than the humble, simple desk. A nice flat surface table that we can use as a basis to build everything else around. Now in this case, since we can't snap these parts at the exact distances we want them, we'll just eyeball it and try and snap the rest of the parts to the first parts we place, and pray that we place the first part straight, because that is going to determine whether everything else is straight or not. Thank God for these short, small walls. They were instrumental and essential into enabling me to snap everything else into place. So, having done the first level of the helm section, we go to the second level. Place some more simple desks. And keep building around them. Obviously, to get everything to snap properly in the position you want it, you will have to do some doing and undoing, placing parts that will help you get the parts you need in place, especially those little floor tiles, which notoriously do not want to snap to anything, but they would snap quite eagerly to small walls. That is, until you get to the triangles, and they don't want to snap to anything, so you'll just have to build larger floor tiles in order to orient them properly. There's quite a bit of trial and error. This is I've done building before in No Man's Sky, but nothing this large, nothing this ambitious. I've done a few large bases out of prefabs mostly, but nothing of this complexity. So if you see me putting down and deleting stuff, that is why. But it's all in the joy of building, of creation, discovering what you can do and what you can't, and finding ways around it. And sometimes what you had in mind wouldn't work at all, like trying to snap this tiny triangle into place that just doesn't work. Unless, of course, you orient the main floor differently. That makes it snap for some reason. And then you delete it and try to snap the square pieces, which takes a lot of fiddling. I don't understand why, but it seems No Man's Sky parts are very selective to what they snap to and what they don't. So you'll just have to fiddle with it enough to find what actually works. And eventually you'll end up with gaps like these, which we'll just have to fill out with parts, sink them in a bit so that they do not get flickering textures between them. Plug the holes with some small walls. I swear this is just the best part in the game. It's No Man's Sky's duct tape, the small walls. And with the second level gallery complete, we move on to the third. And more situations where you can't snap apart unless you sacrificed your firstborn under a full moon. So you just have to put more and more parts of scaffolding and try more and different camera angles until you get that beautiful green color and you can finally place it. And there we have it, the basic layout for the aft section is complete. So we'll just add a couple of walls. And obviously you don't have to stick to the layout you've drawn exactly. As long as you're close enough and it looks right, that's as close as you can get it in No Man's Sky. And it looks like the aft section of the room is pretty much accurate, so we'll level off the walls. And maybe add the sections we missed. Such as the whole part of the gallery where D is supposed to sit. And the problem being that were we to just snap the steps to that outcrop, they would just intrude into the hallway too far, so we'll just eyeball them. Try and get them as straight as possible, and then cover up any outcrops with what else? Small walls. There we go. Straighten it up. And it looks pretty good. We just need to fix that one wall on the right end there. Bring it up to the same height as the others. Check the views from different levels, see if they sort of match the angles that we see on screen on the series, and then put in the rest of the workstations. Darken the white parts a bit so they don't clash too much with the rest. And after that's done, we'll move on to the 4 section, where the navigation table with that large green glass panel is. Which follows a similar layout to the aft section, but inverted. Now the problem is here that the lowest level change we can do in No Man's Sky is the height of a short wall, whereas the nav station from the floor is only separated by a single step, but we'll still get it to look proper. We'll try not to use, like I said, glitch building, because most players aren't used to it, and I'm not used to it either. I'm not really good at it. So most of this build will be pieces you can snap together, and those that you can't will just eyeball. The good old eyeball Mark 1. Sadly, none of the light tables present around the CIC are actually made up of squares. If you pay close attention to the scenes or look at designs, they are actually multi-angle pentagons or hexagons or other complex polyhedrons. But since we only have the square light table, we'll just try to invoke the look and feel of each of these tables. I mean, it would be amazing if we could just have the ability to stretch parts. If anyone from Hello Games actually ends up watching this, please give us the ability to stretch parts and the ability to rotate on more than the Z-axis. Now, if you're wondering why I put a canvas on the tack table, is because I'm trying to recreate the large green navigational screen. However, since the only part we have that even resembles it is a green wall screen, and since they only come at a fixed angle, we'll just have to put various angled pieces behind it in order to make it as close to vertical as possible. And after going through a few parts, I've realized that the primitive shapes pyramid is the part that lets us get this screen as close to vertical as possible. And now all we need to do is actually properly align it at a position that will allow us to put the screen in the right place. Which is rich coming from me, because I realize now, recording the audio after the fact, that I started out by putting the screen in the wrong place. I do fix it, I do put it in the right position, so Battlestar fans, do not stone me. And of course, due to these mounting feet, we have to use other parts to camouflage them, to make it part of sort of the scenery without having to screen mounts like floating in the air. And with the navigation table complete, We'll move on to build the rest of this section's layout and the wall around it. One more perk of building on an airless planet is that the gravity is very low. So if you're high up in a building platform like this and you make a mistake and you fall off, it's not the end of the world. Usually you have enough time to just boost a little and get back on. And after a lot of fiddling with small floor tiles that don't want to snap to anything, and the small short walls saving the day again, we are almost done with this layout of the top level of the navigation section. I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the new building parts, absolutely. However, hello games, please make them snap a little better, especially the new roof tiles. Unfortunately, they only seem to be snapping to each other and nothing else. And if my calculations are correct, we are going to need to use quite a few of them in other parts of this build, not so much the CIC. Now this end of this side of the CIC is a bit special because that is where the damage control nook is. If you remember from the mini-series, this is where the whole altercation between Colonel Tai and the Chief happened, where they unfortunately have had to vent a few of their crew members out into space to douse a fire that was threatening the entire ship. It's the place where you have an entire board schematic of the ship with little green and red LEDs on it. Just trying to get the shape right. It's obviously smaller than this, but having a bit of floor around what you're building helps out, both with eyeballing it and having somewhere to land in case you fall off it. And since we don't have any sort of glass dividers, and a frontage would be way too much. I decided to use one of the legacy pieces there. Also, again, if someone from Hello Games is watching this, please restore access to legacy pieces. I mean, they are insanely useful in this build, and I suspect many others. But I hadn't had the time to unlock them all. I only have access to the basic ones, but they will be immensely helpful in diversifying the look of this ship. And you know, it's nice to have access to more options. There we go, we're finishing off the walls and putting the doors in. Obviously they don't quite snap into place because of the many triangles and weird orientations that we had to use, but eventually they fit together in a nice way. Now the reason I'm using the legacy metal tiles for the ceiling is that their default color is a lot lighter than the modern tiles. I mean, imagine having those black colored tiles just across both the floor and the ceiling of the ship. Obviously, you need the ceiling to be a bit lighter in color, a bit different. And there we have it. Pretty dark. Looks like a power outage in here. But don't worry about it. We'll go on to fix that. But what do we have so far? Looks pretty satisfying. But let's turn on the light, the flashlight, and have a look. I mean, bar the columns, it seems like we've gotten the space quite close to what you would see on screen, except of course this part, the damage control station, that it seemed to me like the ceiling was a bit too high compared to what we've seen on screen, so I just went and put the whole arch and the ceiling on that specific nook a bit lower, and obviously plug the holes with short walls. And there you have it. Not bad. and then all we need to do is build the rest of the stations in and find a way to light it. And that was a big challenge in this build, as lighting in No Man's Sky, lighting interior spaces, is quite problematic, as the lights all seem to be a bit anemic, to say the least, and we don't want to use a lot of visible direct light. I mean, if you look at the show, the CIC at least seems to be lit by all sorts of indirect lighting. You don't really see lighting fixtures around. I'm sure there's a couple here and there, but none that are too obvious. But before we get into that, we'll just try and add the columns, maybe add some temporary light and take off the ceiling so we can move the camera to more convenient positions. And I started trying out using this part, the tall cabinet, which, you know, combine a few of them and it would look great. However, the major drawback of the tall cabinet is that it has no back, and it will only attach on one side to the surface you're pointing at the orientation this surface is. So, not a good choice. Tried out some different things. They just weren't the right size and fit. Or, you know, well, nothing will be, but, you know, we can get things as close as we can. The locker turned out to be the closest thing we had to that size column. Not the full size of it, obviously, because they are quite thick, and they spoke off in 3 different orientations, but, you know, hopefully with some more pieces on them, like the tall cabinet, we can give them some more bulk, get them to look a bit closer to the on-screen ones. Stick some primitive shapes together, which I must admit I have ridiculously and terribly underused so far in my builds, but they seem to be ideal to blend these columns off into the ceiling and to sort of break the straight lines and branch off, give the space a bit more of a cavernous feel, as is the case with the actual CIC set. Then I went back and tried to do the same on the columns in the rear part, but they were a bit higher, so it wouldn't have made a difference. Add a few parts for embellishment. And we'll go on to do a small light test. I'll just put some white lights in strategic places Put the ceiling back on. And run some wires to them and see what sort of lighting we can get. I have an electromagnetic generator down there, but my camera couldn't reach it, so I pulled the line from the teleporter, which worked just as well. And there we go. Although, still, the space is way too dark. So we'll have to focus on sources of ambient lighting. If you've noticed, the 3D's console and the tack table has been consistently bright this whole time. So we'll have to focus more on ambient light coming from screens and stuff like that. So the next place, logically, to continue would be the workstations themselves. At the multitude of screens that are present in the CIC, and we'll see how we get on. And already we can see some sort of difference, but still there is much to be done in terms of lighting. To augment the light from the screens a little, I decided to use this sign, this illuminated sign, but rows of it on the back of the monitors, and just put the monitors on top of them, essentially creating a No Man's Sky first backlit monitors. And we'll use the cabinets on the outside to give the space some more visual complexity and to get it a bit closer to the CIC aesthetics. And you can probably see it takes a lot of fiddling to eyeball everything straight, but it is worth it. Add some embellishments to the columns to improve the space's geometric sort of diversity. Brings it that tiny bit closer to what we see on screen. Not bad, but as you can see, there's still a lot of fiddling. It's kind of hard to eyeball pieces to be completely straight when the camera is constrained by the space itself. But you know, if at first you don't succeed, you try and try and try again, or try something else. And there we go, much closer. The lighting is a bit more lively now. There will be a lot more to do, but we're at a good place. And obviously we apply the gray color to these white components to better blend them with the surroundings. And a fortunate accident that I discovered is that these new wall lights that are absolutely brilliant and require no power, they sort of blend into the metal walls, like most of them at least, the basic walls, and the actual lamps are hidden, give them a sort of ambient lighting feel, or as if there's some hidden lighting reflecting from that spot. So we had a bunch of them around the CIC, which just looks like visual embellishments. and can be hidden quite well in most parts. And as you can see, they've made a heck of a difference. Which means we can turn off our torch now. And it looks pretty well lit in here without any direct lighting source. I mean, a couple of them are visible, especially over the side doors, but all in all, it feels like our CIC is lit by ambient hidden lighting rather than direct light sources. And this is the part that I thought I was done. I was wrong, however, as just after recording this part and as I was in the process of adding some red lights to create an alarm system, I realized that I had forgotten the entire upper gallery of the CIC. I went back and watched some Battlestar episodes, as you do when you're doing builds like these. You go back to the source material, and I realized that even though we got very, very close, we had forgotten the entire top part of the CIC. It just didn't look right. So we'll start with removing the original ceiling. And trying to recreate the floor's geometry to make a sort of balcony and start from there. Although, as you can probably see, because of the differences in floor and ceiling geometry, I had to attach some small walls to the section dividers and build off of those. We are going to be doing a lot of that, as you can see, the parts don't really want to go where we want them to go, so while we're trying to avoid glitch building, we'll have to get twice as creative with scaffoldings. Obviously, we will keep a few of the ceiling tiles in place. And then, because we still want to keep this visual difference from the floor and the ceiling, create the gallery, and then fill in the gaps with, obviously, legacy metal tiles, which I know most of you don't have access to, but it is what it is. Hello games, please bring legacy tiles back. So what we're doing is we'll create this circular gallery. I know if you look closely, this gallery is only on the aft part of the CIC and doesn't go all the way around to the front. However, a problem that I soon discovered, and what really troubled me most in this edition of the gallery, was putting the stairs in, as unfortunately even the thinnest set of stairs in No Man's Sky is actually too thick. You can see in some background shots in the series how the steps that lead up to that gallery are this sort of thin metal steps, which you will see a lot around the ship and around the ship in the series, most notably and most often in the hangar bay. However, trying to use the thin set of stairs in No Man's Sky is going to take up just too much space. And also you have to get the right geometry in place to snap them to. And after putting in a test set of stairs, it becomes apparent that it just interferes with that space too much. So the next thing I tried was to put them half in the wall, half out, to sort of keep this functionality, but in a way that wouldn't intrude in the space too much. And while this early sort of set of stairs worked initially, and it was climbable with no problems, the angle at which it was placed just didn't allow me to put them there where they belong. I just couldn't match any floor tiles to allow passage through. And then I started looking in alternative placement, putting them somewhere else, but again that proved a bit challenging, as anywhere you put them they would just take up too much space. It is what it is. Obviously we only have the parts we have to work with, so in the end I made the decision to invert the stairs, make them go in the opposite direction, as they would interfere with the space under them the least. And since the space between the bottom level and the gallery isn't quite as tall as a set of stairs, I also had to find a way to obviously add some more extra steps for the stairs to be usable. So some eyeballing and some free placement was necessary, but at the end of the day, I think I managed it pretty well. And this is the reason I kept the front half, the fore half of this gallery and made it go all the way around, because with the stairs now oriented towards the fore of the ship instead towards the bow instead of towards the stern, it would be just awkward to make someone double back on themselves as they go up to the gallery. Obviously, it will be quite impossible to recreate the Galactica screen accurately, so we're just building our own sort of version, a No Man's Sky version of the Battlestar, which is why I call this base, which is why I named this base the Battlestar instead of, you know, giving it the actual screen name, because I suspect, due to the not so large variety of angled pieces, and we will have quite a challenge in our hands with the exterior especially. I will try not to glitch build as much as possible in this build. However, I fear that will not be possible 100%. Did manage to completely avoid it on the CIC though, so... And now all we need to do is sort of pad the seam between the bottom floor ceiling and the gallery floor. And mark the perimeter with small walls. Unfortunately, on these sort of seams along the center line, I couldn't get the distancing spot on. Not without tearing the thing up and rebuilding it. So I decided to abide with a bit of flickering on tiles that not many will see anyways, so And now with the ceiling expanded, we need to make the Dradus hub taller, which in the series is comprised of just a simple cylindrical shape. Unfortunately, the primitive shapes in No Man's Sky do not resize. So next best thing to do was find something similar. As I said, this is our own version of the Battlestar, so there will be some visual differences. We'll just try and capture the look and feel as much as we can. But, you know, even in the real world, sister ships along the same line and built basically along the same from the same blueprints, they have minor differences, iterations, or you know, improvements that are made from ship to ship as the first ship in a line gets used, and different iterations and solutions to the same problems are being introduced. Small alterations in the designs and small differences aren't at all uncommon between sister ships, or basically a number of ships that have been built from the same blueprints. Every ship continuously iterated and improved upon in areas that will not affect the production too much. So with everything done, we can move on to the beams that reach up all the way up to the ceiling. They are continuations of the columns, so we will try and place them accordingly. Obviously, before we do that, we seal up any gaps in the ceiling from the lower floor. Very fiddly, as you can see. I mean, in this sped up footage, sometimes it can be quite annoying, and I apologize for that, but this is just the result of just fiddling around with the cursor, trying to find the spot which would actually make these parts snap. And it is quite fiddly. But stick at it long enough and eventually you'll get there. Plug up the holes between floor and ceiling, the small walls, the duct tape of the NMS building. Place any parts you missed. Which sometimes just don't want to snap in the orientation you want them, they just snap to whichever ones they want to. But still. And obviously we go through these holes in the floor quite often to as we add more pieces around them to make sure they are still passable and usable. And finally we end up on the top beams, the top of the columns, which are actually, they're blink and you'll miss it. You can only see them in a few scenes where characters are privately conversing on top of the gallery. Most these legacy half arches are actually almost screen perfect. In the I saw them in the first season episode, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, a very funny episode if you've seen, if you've watched the series. But they look almost exactly the same as they do on Galactica. Now, the only real problem, because of the spacing differences between the actual measurements of the ship and No Man's Sky parts, are that No Man's Sky parts are set dimensions, and while these sort of three-spoked T-beams are supposed to be where the main columns end, they are not quite aligned in this case. But we'll do our best to make them sort of the visual continuation of the large columns from the bottom floor to the top. These cabinets, as fiddly as they may be, they have been invaluable in sort of augmenting this geometry and creating a visual continuation from floor to ceiling across all levels. And it was actually here that I realized that this column, while trying to attach these cabinets, by the way they stuck out differed from the one I just placed. It was this point that I realized that this column is not correctly aligned, that it's way too different from its corresponding opposite. Sticks out way more. Probably can't see it, and it did take me a bit longer to spot, but I knew something was off. I tried some more variations, see if I'd gone wrong with the sizing, but it just didn't work to blend at all. So I went back and deleted the column, and obviously tried as much as possible to eyeball the exact same alignment as its corresponding twin. You will see a lot of back and forth trying to get this one right, see how the other one relates to the parts around it. And try and get this one at the same size and orientation. Finally managed to put it in the correct position. Double check. I mean, I know I've spent this footage up by a factor of 4. So if there's any parts of this build you have questions on, you can always slow the video down, or obviously toss me a comment and I'll try and explain my process as best as possible. Still trying more parts, maybe snapping some more primitives on there, some wall cabinets to better blend the column lines, but primitives proved to be a bit too bulky and intrusive. Clip through all the other parts, so I just went back to the tall cabinet. And by adding this geometry, I just tried to make this a coherent visual line for the eye to follow, to sort of make sense. Ah, yeah, that is how the column goes. So this sort of thing. Add the last few parts and the red light we deleted, and we can move on to the roof, well, the ceiling actually of the CIC, which is angled. So starting off from the original half arches and putting down some more scaffolding, I'll try enclose this gap as much as possible, plug any holes with short walls. And with so many points, you can probably already see how parts want to snap to everything else other than you place you need them to. But it is to be expected on a build of this complexity and this number of parts. I seriously hope that this doesn't hit base limits. Otherwise I'll have to try and build it in sections from different accounts. I mean, I've already scrapped a few of my larger builds that I wasn't really using anymore in order to free up sort of the space for this. But I think it's going to be worth it, you know, if all goes well. I hope a lot of people will come and enjoy it. and it could be a source of joy and inspiration and creative inspiration for other players out there. And we'll use the legacy short walls to plug up the gap. Make sure there are no seams through which we can see the outside. Make sure the ceiling tiles that we've added are symmetrical, so we don't have visual inconsistencies on the outside. Sorry, on the inside. We don't really care about the outside, as it won't really be visible. Once the interior spaces are sort of completed, the hull will be built around them and cover all this trickery up. And using a few more arches, we put the final roof pieces. Correct as required. Remove the arches and finally close up the entire ceiling. And there is a bit of overlap, however, these legacy tiles are very good, not flickering. So there we go. Now this is a lot better. This is what we should have done from the beginning. But you live and you learn. A lot of the time you live and you learn as you build. And we left a hole there, so we'll plug that up. If only we can get those triangles to snap to the position that we want them to, and in the orientation, because sometimes you'll get the position enabled but they just don't want to go in the orientation that you want them. As I said, quite difficult building in this sort of constrained space, even with the build camera. And there we have it. We have the whole upper gallery. The only thing that's missing now, light. And obviously we'll follow the same strategy as we did for the rest of the CIC. And clip the wall lights into the wall tiles so that we don't see the direct light source. Add some of these to the banisters. And there you have it. The complete CIC this time. With the upper gallery and everything. Still a couple things to put in. But first, remember what I told you about the tack table. See, the problem was that I initially started the build based off an early production design of the space. However, in the final construction of the set, the tack table was set parallel to the navigation table instead of at an angle as was on the design. Another thing that I noticed while going back to the series, so we'll just have to straighten that bow tie. Put some embellishments around it. Yeah, maybe not that high. Now this build was supposed to be a streamed series, streamed on Twitch with a copy or a shortened version posted to YouTube. However, me being the idiot that I am, didn't actually turn streaming on while filming this, so I ended up with just the recording. But on future episodes they will be streamed and you will be able to see me do the rest of the ship live. Or maybe if you're not into that, catch the shortened versions here on YouTube. So there we go. We'll use the gas canister to emulate the phone. Tried out some more things to add, as they have quite a few sort of interfaces there. Nothing really sort of stuck, so I thought I'd leave it there for the time being. Put a cup down, one for Thai, one for Adama. And there we have it. But obviously it's not complete without proper seating. There we go. Pull all the chairs. Gata's chair. Put some of them in different angles, make the ship look a bit lived in. Make sure the color doesn't clash with the rest of the environment. And there we go. Now, only one thing left to do. Correct our mistakes, obviously. And wire in those red lights that you've seen around. So, first thing we will do is have a look on the outside after we save. So we'll start from below, and as you'll see, I've still got that power line from my electromagnetic generator, which I've hooked up to an inverter, making a NOT gate, which is basically a way to tell the inverter not to let any electricity through unless a switch is turned off. You've probably noticed the switch under the navigation console. So this is where our power line ends up, and in order to make our alarm lights blink, we'll need to add what is called a clock circuit. How do we do that? It's very simple. We start with an inverter, which you will see I take way much time fiddling with, as if the orientation of it will matter, because obviously nobody's going to see it, but even in this 4 times sped up footage, you see it takes quite a bit of time. Hook the power to the input, and then this is one of my favorite cable management techniques. In order to make sure our cables do not clip through our build, I just put down some lights. All these lights have a connection point on them. So basically, setting out the lights where you want your cable to go will just make your life a lot easier, will help you with cable management. You'll probably think why I don't just use a cable hider. Well, I could, but if I can avoid it, why would I? And it's better to, think about cable management a bit. So we'll connect all the lights first. From the central power point after the inverter. That is important, after the inverter. Across both sides of the CIC, all the way to the back. Add some more lights to make cable placement easy. There we go. And along the other side. Do not loop that circuit. It's best to just either use one side to hook up all the lights, or, as I did, do each side separately. So, and to complete our little clock circuit, all we'll do is pull a cable to the input of the inverter, to the signal port of the inverter, that is the middle port, and simply make a loop from our main power line back to the inverter, from the output to the signal port, and delete all the lights. What this loop will do is every time the lights power on, it will loop the power back into the signal input of the inverter and tell it to turn the power off. And once it does, it will reset. So it will continuously flip through the two states of on and off in ticks of about a second, which is what we call a clock circuit. I don't know, I wish I could add the sound. I don't know if that's something we can do. Maybe with byte beats, but I haven't even dabbled in byte beats. I don't think I even have the part unlocked. Maybe I should get on that, see if we could make an alarm sound, but you can just hear it. That is a picture you can hear if you're a fan of the series. And this is how the circuit looks on the outside. You'll see our little clock loop in action. So basically, the power flows out of the output of the inverter, loops back into the signal and tells the inverter to close as soon as their power, continuously flipping the inverter between the on and off settings. Alright. So let's put the ship back to condition 2. And there we have it. This is pretty much it. We didn't use any glitch building. I am quite proud of that, but if any of you have any more suggestions or, you know, things that we could have done differently, improvements, please feel free to share. I mean, I'm open to improvements all the time, and obviously I would love to hear your thoughts, criticisms or impressions on the whole thing. So this is it. Our CIC is complete. A whole Battlestar to follow, hopefully, if we can pull it off. So I guess I'll see you in the next one. Please like, subscribe, and stay safe, stay epic.